Tanya Jackson woke up early that morning, the sun barely spilling light into her apartment. She moved with precision, her body still toned and strong from years of Navy SEAL training. Even though she had left active service, the discipline remained. She drank her coffee slowly, savoring each sip, letting her mind organize the day ahead. Today, she needed to attend a court hearing. It was a minor legal matter, just a formality for a past traffic incident that had nothing to do with her. Still, Tanya knew the importance of being prepared. As she dressed in simple, professional clothing, she checked her reflection in the mirror. Her dark eyes met her own steady gaze. Tanya always noticed details, a habit ingrained in her during missions. She looked for signs of tension in her own posture, in the way her shoulders carried stress. Satisfied, she picked up her bag and headed out. The streets were quiet in the morning. She walked with calm confidence, observing the city waking up around her. The courthouse was an old brick building, its doors heavy and imposing. Inside, the air was cool, filled with the faint scent of polished wood and paper. Tanya moved through the halls with quiet determination, her footsteps deliberate but soft. She noticed the clerks behind their desks, the way people spoke in hushed tones, the subtle glances from those passing by. She didn't react to them, but she took mental notes. In her experience, observation was often the key to staying ahead. Officer Daniel Reeves had been at the courthouse for almost an hour when Tanya arrived. Reeves was a man who believed strongly in authority and his own sense of power. He wore his uniform like armor, his badge gleaming in the morning light. He had noticed Tanya when she entered, a solitary woman carrying herself with confidence. Something about her unsettled him. Perhaps it was the way she did not look intimidated, or the calm in her eyes. Whatever it was, it sparked his need to assert dominance. As Tanya approached the counter to check in, Reeves made a move. He stepped slightly closer, speaking in a tone that was polite on the surface but laced with subtle threat. "Good morning, ma'am. You're here for the Jackson case?" he asked, emphasizing her last name. Tanya looked at him, measured her response, and nodded. Her voice was clear, calm, and polite. "Yes, officer. I'm here for a routine hearing." Reeves's eyes narrowed slightly, his mind sensing an opportunity. He started asking questions that were not really necessary, questions that seemed designed to provoke. Tanya answered them without raising her voice, never showing irritation, but Reeves misread her calmness for weakness. He did not know that beneath her composed exterior was someone trained to handle far more dangerous situations than a courthouse disagreement. The waiting area was sparse, filled with wooden benches and a few people quietly shuffling papers or speaking softly on their phones. Tanya found a seat near the back, close enough to observe, far enough to remain unobtrusive. Reeves, not satisfied with his initial interaction, lingered nearby. He made small remarks loud enough for Tanya to hear, comments designed to unsettle or annoy. He did not realize that Tanya noticed everything, the way his hand rested near his duty belt, the slight twitch in his eyes when he thought she might respond aggressively. Tanya's mind ran through scenarios quietly. She didn't need to act yet, observation was key. In her past life as a Navy SEAL, she had learned that understanding an opponent often gave more advantage than confronting them directly. Reeves was predictable, motivated by ego rather than logic. That made him dangerous in his own way, but not enough to worry her yet. She let him make small missteps, recording them in her mental notes. Minutes passed, and the courtroom doors opened. People shuffled inside, finding their seats. Tanya's case was called, and she rose smoothly, her movements precise. Reeves followed, trying to position himself in a way that might give him more control over the situation. But Tanya moved with purpose, walking directly to the clerk, her posture open but firm. She handed over her paperwork, keeping her voice steady and professional. "Everything seems in order," the clerk said, giving her a polite nod. Tanya thanked her and turned toward the courtroom. Reeves lingered behind, muttering something about procedure. Tanya ignored it. She had learned long ago that words without action meant little. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was quiet, filled with the faint sound of papers shuffling and pens scratching. Tanya found a seat, sitting upright, her eyes scanning the room. Her training made her aware of even the smallest details, the position of the judge, the behavior of the officers, the interactions of the staff. She noticed Reeves sitting slightly off to the side, tapping his pen nervously. He was trying to maintain control, but he was already off balance. When the proceedings began, Reeves took every opportunity to assert himself. He spoke over others, corrected minor procedural details, and made pointed comments directed at Tanya. The judge, a calm and experienced woman, allowed the officer to continue at first, likely hoping the situation would settle itself. Tanya, however, remained unshaken. She answered questions concisely, never allowing her emotions to give Reeves any satisfaction. Outside, the air seemed heavy, almost holding its breath, as if the building itself sensed the tension building inside. Tanya remained aware, quietly analyzing Reeves's behavior. She noticed his small tells, the way he adjusted his uniform when stressed, the subtle clenching of his jaw, the impatience that betrayed his overconfidence. She catalogued each detail, not for confrontation yet, but for preparation. A brief pause in the proceedings gave Tanya a moment to reflect. She remembered the countless hours in the Navy SEAL training grounds, the missions that had tested her endurance, her focus, and her judgment. Courtroom harassment was minor compared to anything she had faced. Yet, the principle remained the same: remain calm, observe, and act with precision when the time came. As Reeves continued to make unnecessary comments, Tanya's calm demeanor seemed to frustrate him further. Each attempt he made to unsettle her fell flat. The courtroom staff began noticing the unusual dynamic: a young, composed woman who did not respond to provocation, and an officer who seemed increasingly desperate to assert authority. Tanya's inner thoughts were quiet but methodical. She was not seeking confrontation yet. Her goal was simple: ensure her legal matter was resolved without letting Reeves's harassment escalate. But she was prepared for any situation. Her training gave her confidence that she could handle far more than a courthouse disagreement. When her case was finally called, Tanya rose and approached the bench. Her movements were smooth, practiced, yet natural. Reeves followed, trying to stay in control, but his attempts were obvious to anyone watching. Tanya presented her documents clearly and confidently. She answered the judge's questions directly, without hesitation, her voice steady. Reeves made one final attempt to interrupt, but Tanya's calm gaze met his. There was no anger, no challenge, only quiet authority. Reeves faltered, realizing for the first time that this woman was not intimidated by him. The judge, noticing the tension, subtly signaled for order. Tanya's quiet strength had shifted the balance. By the time the hearing concluded, Tanya had handled the situation with professionalism and grace. Reeves left, muttering under his breath, clearly unsettled by her calm but firm presence. Tanya gathered her things and left the courtroom, her mind already reviewing every detail of the interaction, preparing for any next steps if necessary. Outside the courthouse, the sunlight felt warm on her face. Tanya walked calmly to her car, her movements relaxed but alert. She had faced a subtle but real challenge and had handled it with precision. In her mind, she acknowledged the tension, the intimidation, and the small victories of staying composed. She knew the real story was just beginning, but she also knew she was ready for whatever came next. Tanya drove away from the courthouse, the city moving around her, unaware of the quiet storm that had just taken place inside its walls. She was a woman of discipline, skill, and focus. And while Reeves had tried to challenge her, he had not yet seen the full extent of who she was. After the courthouse incident, Tanya Jackson felt a quiet tension settle over her. She knew that Officer Daniel Reeves would not let go easily. Some people, when denied the reaction they seek, become more determined to assert control. Tanya had faced countless challenges in her Navy SEAL missions, but she also knew that human behavior could be just as unpredictable and dangerous as any combat scenario. Over the next few days, Tanya noticed subtle changes. When she visited the local DMV for another administrative task, Reeves was there again. He seemed to appear wherever she went, as if he had made it his personal mission to intimidate her. He made casual comments, loud enough for her to hear, about her paperwork, her presence, even her choice of clothing. Tanya's calm gaze met his every time, her expression unreadable. She had learned that remaining composed was often the best way to disarm an opponent. Tanya kept a careful record of each encounter. Her mind catalogued details, the time, the place, the exact words spoken, and any witnesses nearby. In her SEAL training, documentation and careful observation had saved lives during missions. Here, it would serve to protect her against the officer's harassment. She didn't act impulsively, she acted methodically. Reeves, however, grew more reckless. He began filing complaints against Tanya, exaggerating minor issues to make her appear difficult or aggressive. In court, staff started to murmur, unsure of who was in the right. Tanya noticed the subtle glances, the questions posed quietly behind her back. She understood how easily perception could be manipulated. She remained polite, answering every question with precision, ensuring there was no opportunity for false statements. One afternoon, as Tanya returned from her part-time work at a local community center, she saw Reeves outside the building, waiting. He stepped forward as she walked past. "Miss Jackson," he said, a fake smile on his face, "I didn't expect to see you here. Everything okay with your paperwork?" His tone was casual, but the way he positioned his body, slightly blocking her path, was meant to intimidate. Tanya paused for a moment, letting her eyes scan the area. She noticed the positions of pedestrians, the angle of the sun, the distance from the street. Her training had taught her to assess every environment for risk. She calmly replied, "Yes, officer. Everything is fine. Thank you." She moved past him with slow, deliberate steps, never raising her voice, never showing fear. Reeves's smile faltered. Tanya had ignored his attempt to provoke her. Over the following week, the harassment escalated in more subtle ways. Reeves would call ahead to Tanya's workplace, asking questions about her behavior, trying to create problems where none existed. He would appear near her favorite coffee shop, lingering too close, making comments meant to unsettle her. Tanya, however, remained aware, alert, and prepared. She adjusted her routine slightly but refused to let him dictate her life. One morning, Tanya arrived early at court for another minor hearing. Reeves had already arrived, clearly aware of her presence. He began making exaggerated notes in his folder, glancing at Tanya repeatedly. The tension in the room was noticeable. Court staff sensed it. Tanya, seated quietly, maintained a calm composure that contrasted sharply with Reeves's visible agitation. During a brief break in the hearing, Reeves approached Tanya near the hallway. "You think you're so clever, don't you?" he said under his breath, attempting to provoke a reaction. Tanya's eyes met his, calm yet sharp. "I just follow the law, officer," she replied evenly. "That's all any of us should do." Her words were simple, but they carried authority. Reeves's face betrayed a flicker of surprise. She was not reacting in the way he expected. Tanya knew that confrontation would escalate the situation unnecessarily. She had learned from her military experience that patience was often more powerful than aggression. Instead of responding emotionally, she focused on gathering evidence of Reeves's misconduct. Every comment, every attempt to intimidate her, was recorded in her mind. She even made careful notes afterward, detailing exactly what had occurred, including the time, location, and any witnesses. Reeves's behavior continued to grow bolder. During a routine hearing, he made a false accusation about Tanya's behavior in a previous courtroom session, claiming she had been aggressive toward staff. Tanya listened quietly as he spoke, never interrupting, never showing the slightest frustration. When given the chance, she responded with calm clarity, pointing out the inaccuracies with precise facts and calmly presenting witnesses who could confirm her account. The judge, impressed by Tanya's composure and clear reasoning, allowed her to speak fully, and Reeves's statement began to unravel. Outside the courthouse, Tanya reflected on the situation. Her life had changed since leaving active duty, but some challenges remained constant. The principles she had learned, discipline, observation, strategic thinking, were still relevant. Reeves's harassment was a test of patience and intellect, not brute strength. Tanya was confident she could handle it. One afternoon, Tanya returned home to find a letter slipped under her door. It was a formal complaint from Reeves, filled with exaggerations and mischaracterizations. Tanya examined it carefully. Every word, every claim, was an opportunity to respond with evidence. She noted dates, witnesses, and procedural errors. She wasn't angry, she was methodical. The letter would serve as proof of his attempts to manipulate the system and intimidate her. Tanya's friends noticed a change in her routine. She was more focused, more cautious, but still outgoing and approachable. She did not allow Reeves's harassment to isolate her or change who she was. Her Navy SEAL training had taught her that resilience and calm focus were essential. Threats could be dangerous, but fear was not an option. Reeves, growing frustrated, decided to escalate further. During another hearing, he tried to question Tanya aggressively in front of the judge, pushing her to respond emotionally. Tanya stayed calm. She answered each question clearly, without hesitation, presenting facts and evidence methodically. The judge observed the interaction and gently reminded Reeves to maintain professional behavior. He bristled, clearly frustrated that Tanya refused to react as he expected. Tanya began noticing patterns in Reeves's behavior. He thrived on attention, on eliciting a reaction. She realized that by remaining calm, documenting everything, and letting the system work, she could protect herself without giving him satisfaction. Each interaction became a careful dance, Tanya staying several steps ahead, her mind always analyzing, always planning. One evening, after another exhausting day, Tanya sat at her kitchen table reviewing her notes. Each encounter with Reeves was meticulously recorded. She reviewed statements, times, and potential witnesses. Her strategy was clear: remain professional, gather evidence, and wait for the right moment. She was not seeking revenge, only justice. The calm in her home contrasted with the tension of the courthouse, reminding her of the importance of mental focus. Even with the growing harassment, Tanya maintained her routine. She exercised, meditated, and volunteered at the community center. Her life was full, but she never ignored the lurking presence of Reeves's interference. Every day, she reminded herself that preparation and patience were more powerful than anger or retaliation. Weeks passed, and Reeves's attempts to intimidate Tanya became more desperate. He tried to manipulate court staff, made false claims, and even whispered threats in hallways. Yet, Tanya's calm composure and careful observation made him appear foolish to anyone paying attention. Court staff began noticing the disparity: a composed, polite woman being harassed by an officer who seemed increasingly unprofessional. Through it all, Tanya's inner strength was evident. She never allowed herself to panic or lash out. Every step was deliberate, every word measured. She was ready for anything, quietly confident in her ability to handle the situation. She had faced far greater dangers in her life and understood that patience, strategy, and composure were often stronger than immediate action. By the end of Part 2, Tanya had managed to turn Reeves's harassment into an opportunity to demonstrate her calm authority. While he grew frustrated and reckless, she gathered evidence, strengthened her position, and maintained her dignity. The story had shifted. Tanya was no longer just a target, she was a careful, observant strategist, quietly preparing for the moment when justice would finally be served. Tanya Jackson had grown accustomed to the tension that seemed to follow Officer Daniel Reeves wherever she went. Each encounter was a subtle battle of wills, one she had learned to approach with strategy rather than emotion. But as days passed, Tanya realized Reeves was becoming bolder. His attempts to provoke her were no longer subtle, they were increasingly aggressive and reckless. He had made a serious miscalculation, he did not know who he was dealing with. The morning started like any other. Tanya arrived early at the courthouse, her calm demeanor masking the anticipation she felt inside. She wore a simple blouse and slacks, her hair neatly pulled back. Her appearance was professional, unremarkable to most, but every movement was deliberate, reflecting years of disciplined training. As she approached the building, she noticed Reeves lingering near the entrance, his posture tense. He straightened immediately when he saw her, a forced smile plastered on his face. Inside the courthouse, Tanya's senses were alert. She noticed details others might overlook, the positioning of security cameras, the behavior of court staff, the flow of people through the hallways. Every detail was another piece of the environment she could use to her advantage if necessary. Reeves was clearly trying to assert dominance, moving closer with each step she took, his presence designed to intimidate. But Tanya did not flinch. The hearing began with procedural formalities. Reeves took his usual position nearby, attempting to influence the proceedings with subtle gestures and comments. He leaned over toward the court clerk, whispering about Tanya's behavior, hoping to sway perception. Tanya, seated calmly, observed everything. She noticed his small tells, the way his fingers drummed on the desk, the slight twitch in his eye when he expected a reaction from her. She catalogued each detail, as she had during her Navy SEAL training, when understanding an opponent's movements could mean the difference between success and failure. During a brief recess, Reeves approached Tanya in the hallway. "You think you can outsmart me," he said under his breath, trying to provoke her. Tanya met his gaze steadily. "I'm simply following the rules," she replied calmly. "That's all any of us should do." Her voice was soft, measured, but carried a quiet authority that made Reeves hesitate. He had expected anger, frustration, or fear, any of which would have validated his attempts at intimidation, but Tanya gave none. Reeves's frustration was growing. He began pressing the court clerk with questions about Tanya's previous actions, attempting to create the appearance of misconduct. Tanya stayed composed, carefully noting each question and response. Her strategy was clear: she would let Reeves make mistakes, record evidence of his improper behavior, and respond with precision when the time was right. Every interaction was a tactical exercise, a rehearsal for a confrontation that would be resolved not with anger, but with careful control. In the courtroom, the hearing proceeded. Reeves tried again to provoke Tanya by questioning her about an unrelated incident, suggesting she had been uncooperative in the past. Tanya responded with calm clarity, providing accurate information and correcting inaccuracies without raising her voice. The judge, an experienced and observant woman, began to notice the contrast: Tanya's composed professionalism versus Reeves's increasingly obvious attempts to dominate. The officer's confidence was starting to crumble. After the hearing, Tanya walked to a nearby cafe to review her notes. Reeves, ever persistent, appeared outside the window, watching. Tanya noticed him but remained focused on her task. She reviewed every interaction, cross-checking dates, times, and witnesses. Each attempt Reeves had made to intimidate her was now evidence. Tanya felt a quiet satisfaction: she had learned long ago that patience and preparation were more powerful than impulsive reactions. Over the next several days, Tanya continued to navigate her daily routines while Reeves's harassment became more unpredictable. He appeared at community events where Tanya volunteered, lingered near her apartment building, and tried to elicit responses in public spaces. Tanya remained vigilant but unflustered. She adjusted her routine slightly for safety, but she refused to let Reeves control her life. Her calm focus unsettled him further. One afternoon, Tanya received a formal letter from the courthouse. Reeves had submitted another complaint, claiming she had behaved aggressively during a previous hearing. Tanya read the letter carefully, noting inconsistencies and inaccuracies. Instead of reacting emotionally, she meticulously documented each point, cross-referencing times, witness statements, and security footage. This was not just defense, it was a methodical approach to exposing Reeves's misconduct. The following morning, Tanya arrived at court early. Reeves was already inside, pacing as he prepared to confront her again. Tanya entered quietly, her steps measured and her expression neutral. Reeves's gaze followed her, a mixture of frustration and disbelief on his face. He had expected her to show fear or irritation, but Tanya's calmness was unwavering. During the hearing, Reeves attempted to interrupt her while she was answering the judge's questions. Tanya remained composed, speaking clearly and concisely. She presented facts and evidence that countered Reeves's exaggerated claims, illustrating the contrast between truth and his attempts at manipulation. The judge, noticing Tanya's methodical approach, allowed her to continue without interruption. Reeves's interruptions became increasingly ineffective, his authority undermined by his own recklessness. In a private moment in the hallway, Tanya confronted Reeves quietly but firmly. "Officer Reeves, I suggest you focus on the facts," she said. "Attempts to intimidate me will not work. The court expects professional behavior, and I intend to comply fully." Her words were calm, yet carried a weight that made Reeves hesitate. For the first time, he realized he was dealing with someone far more disciplined than he had anticipated. Reeves's mistakes began to accumulate. He misrepresented facts, miscommunicated with clerks, and allowed his frustration to show in front of witnesses. Tanya's observations became a detailed record, each incident reinforcing her position. Her Navy SEAL training had taught her that patience, documentation, and strategic awareness were crucial in high-stress situations. She applied those lessons now, quietly but effectively. By midweek, Tanya noticed subtle changes in court staff behavior. Clerks and other officials began to watch Reeves more closely, recognizing his overreach. Tanya's calm and professional demeanor had earned her respect, while Reeves's attempts at intimidation were increasingly transparent. The balance of power was shifting. Tanya did not gloat, she remained focused, understanding that true control came from preparation and composure, not anger or aggression. One evening, Tanya reflected on the week's events. She reviewed her notes, summarizing each incident and evaluating her next steps. She did not seek confrontation, she sought justice and resolution. Her training had ingrained in her the value of patience, strategic thinking, and precise action. The situation with Reeves, while frustrating, was now under her careful control. She felt a quiet confidence, knowing that when the right moment came, she could respond effectively. The following morning, Tanya arrived at the courthouse with a clear plan. Reeves, sensing his growing frustration, tried to provoke her again. Tanya met each attempt with calm composure, answering questions precisely and presenting evidence where necessary. Reeves's overconfidence began to work against him. The judge and court staff were noticing the pattern, Tanya's professionalism versus Reeves's repeated harassment. During a short recess, Tanya found herself near the hallway where Reeves often attempted confrontation. He approached, trying once again to elicit a reaction. Tanya remained calm, her voice steady as she spoke. "Officer Reeves, your behavior is being recorded and will be reviewed by the court. Please remember that professionalism is required." Her words were firm yet polite, leaving no room for argument. Reeves faltered, realizing his actions were being documented and observed. By the end of the day, Tanya had effectively shifted the dynamic. Reeves, frustrated and off balance, had revealed his impatience and overreach. Tanya had remained calm, collected, and methodical throughout every interaction. Her strategy of observation, documentation, and composed response was working. The court staff now viewed her as professional, capable, and credible, while Reeves's attempts to intimidate had begun to backfire. Tanya walked out of the courthouse, the sunlight warm on her face. She reflected on the week, recognizing the subtle victories she had achieved. Reeves had underestimated her discipline, her patience, and her strategic thinking. Tanya knew the situation was not over, but she felt prepared. She had navigated harassment with calm authority, and the foundation was set for the next stage, exposing misconduct and ensuring justice. As she drove home, Tanya thought about the lessons from her Navy SEAL experience. Patience, observation, and careful planning could overcome even the most persistent opposition. Reeves had no idea of the depth of her skill, and she intended to maintain that advantage. The tension was far from resolved, but Tanya's confidence grew with every calculated step she took. She was ready for whatever came next, quietly preparing to turn the tables on the officer who had tried to intimidate her. Tanya Jackson had been preparing for this moment for weeks. Every encounter with Officer Daniel Reeves had been a test of patience, observation, and strategy. She had documented his behavior, noted inconsistencies, and watched carefully as his attempts at intimidation grew more desperate. Reeves had made one critical mistake: he underestimated her. He had no idea that Tanya was not just calm under pressure, but trained to handle far more dangerous situations than any courthouse harassment. The morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the courthouse, casting long shadows across the polished floors. Tanya walked in quietly, her steps measured and purposeful. She wore simple professional clothing, but every movement radiated confidence and control. Reeves was already there, pacing nervously near the entrance. His eyes lit up with a mixture of frustration and anticipation when he spotted her. He thought he could corner her today, as he had tried so many times before. Tanya scanned the room, noting details others might miss: the positions of cameras, the seating of clerks and officers, even the angle of the sunlight reflecting on the polished floor. Her mind catalogued everything, a habit ingrained from her Navy SEAL training. She did not fear Reeves, but she respected the importance of awareness. She understood that knowledge of the environment could provide leverage. The judge called the courtroom to order, and the proceedings began. Reeves tried his usual tactics: whispered comments, exaggerated claims, and subtle gestures meant to provoke Tanya. She responded with calm clarity, answering every question with precision and politeness. She never raised her voice, never allowed her emotions to show, and maintained perfect composure. The contrast between her professionalism and Reeves's growing frustration was obvious to everyone present. During a recess, Reeves approached Tanya in the hallway, his voice low and urgent. "You think you're untouchable, don't you?" he asked, attempting to intimidate her. Tanya's expression remained neutral, her eyes steady. "I follow the law and respect the process," she replied softly but firmly. "That is all I am required to do." Her calm authority caused Reeves to hesitate. He had expected anger, frustration, or fear. Instead, he met only quiet confidence. Tanya had planned this carefully. She had gathered evidence of Reeves's harassment, recordings of his false accusations, documented witness statements, and surveillance footage that showed his improper behavior. Every attempt he had made to manipulate or intimidate her was now concrete evidence. Today, she intended to present it in a way that would be undeniable. As the courtroom reconvened, Tanya's case was called. She approached the bench, her posture perfect, her steps measured. Reeves tried to interject, but the judge, noticing his agitation, firmly instructed him to allow Tanya to speak. Tanya took a deep breath and began to present her evidence methodically. She spoke clearly, providing dates, times, and witness accounts for every instance of harassment and false reporting. The courtroom listened intently. Reeves's confident demeanor began to crumble as Tanya laid out each point with calm precision. She referenced the surveillance footage, explaining exactly what it showed and how it contradicted his claims. She introduced statements from clerks and other officials who had observed his behavior. Her voice remained steady throughout, conveying authority without aggression. Reeves attempted to argue, but Tanya anticipated his moves. She had prepared for every potential objection, addressing them with facts and logic. Her Navy SEAL training had taught her to stay several steps ahead, and today, it was paying off. Reeves's interruptions became less effective, and his frustration was obvious to everyone watching. The judge asked Reeves to respond formally, but his words were weak and disorganized. Tanya had clearly anticipated his arguments, and each one crumbled under the weight of her documented evidence. Reeves's attempts at intimidation were revealed for what they were: unprofessional behavior driven by ego rather than reason. The contrast between Tanya's calm professionalism and Reeves's unraveling demeanor was stark. Tanya continued her presentation, moving smoothly from one piece of evidence to the next. She highlighted the pattern of harassment, the false accusations, and the repeated attempts to manipulate court staff. She spoke with quiet authority, never raising her voice, never showing irritation. Every word reinforced her credibility and highlighted Reeves's misconduct. By the time Tanya finished, the courtroom was silent. Reeves sat, stunned, realizing that his efforts to intimidate her had failed completely. The judge, a composed woman with years of experience, acknowledged Tanya's professionalism and thoroughness. She praised the clarity of Tanya's evidence and the careful way she had presented her case. Reeves was instructed to undergo a formal review of his conduct, and the court made it clear that harassment or intimidation would not be tolerated. Outside the courtroom, Tanya felt a quiet sense of satisfaction. She had not acted out of anger or aggression, she had relied on preparation, observation, and careful strategy. She had turned Reeves's harassment into evidence of his own misconduct, exposing his attempts to manipulate the system. Her calm authority had not only protected her but had also revealed the truth to everyone watching. Reeves, meanwhile, was left to face the consequences of his actions. His frustration and overconfidence had blinded him to Tanya's capabilities. He had underestimated her patience, her preparation, and her ability to remain composed under pressure. In trying to intimidate her, he had only highlighted his own unprofessional behavior. In the days following the courtroom revelation, Tanya continued her routine with confidence. She returned to her work at the community center, attended personal appointments, and maintained her disciplined exercise regimen. She remained vigilant, aware that Reeves might attempt further retaliation, but she was prepared. Every step she took was deliberate, every decision measured, and her calm authority was evident to those around her. Tanya's friends and colleagues noticed a change as well. They admired her composure and resilience, impressed by the way she had handled the situation without anger or confrontation. Tanya quietly shared some of her strategies for maintaining calm under pressure, emphasizing the importance of observation, preparation, and patience. Her story became an example of how discipline and careful planning could overcome harassment and intimidation. Meanwhile, Reeves's reputation began to shift. Court staff and officials became more aware of his repeated misconduct, and his attempts to assert authority were scrutinized more closely. Tanya's careful documentation and calm presentation had created a record that could not be ignored. Reeves's confidence eroded further as he realized that the very person he had tried to intimidate had outmaneuvered him at every step. Tanya reflected on the entire experience. She realized that her training and experience had prepared her for far greater challenges, but the principles remained the same: patience, observation, and strategic action were powerful tools. She had faced harassment, intimidation, and false accusations, yet she had maintained her dignity and authority throughout. Her calm composure had turned the tables completely, exposing Reeves's misconduct and restoring fairness to the situation. By the end of Part 4, Tanya had achieved a decisive victory. She had revealed the truth, exposed harassment, and demonstrated that calm authority and preparation could overcome attempts at intimidation. Reeves had no idea of the full extent of her capabilities, and the court and its staff had witnessed her professionalism firsthand. Tanya's patience, discipline, and strategic thinking had ensured that justice was served, and that the harassment she had endured would no longer continue unchecked. As she left the courthouse that day, Tanya walked with quiet confidence. The sunlight on her face was warm, a reminder of the calm after the storm. She knew the situation with Reeves was far from ordinary, but she also knew that her preparation and composure had brought her through successfully. She had faced a challenge, turned it into an opportunity, and emerged stronger and more respected. Tanya drove home, reflecting on the lessons learned. She understood that strength was not always about confrontation or force, it was about strategy, patience, and the ability to remain calm in the face of provocation. Reeves had underestimated her, and that mistake had cost him credibility and authority. Tanya had shown that true power often lies in composure and careful planning. Her story spread quietly among those who had witnessed it, a testament to the effectiveness of calm authority in overcoming harassment and intimidation. Tanya continued her life, disciplined, focused, and prepared, knowing that she had handled one of the most challenging situations she had faced with intelligence and integrity. The courtroom saga had reached its turning point. Tanya had revealed her strength not through aggression, but through strategy, observation, and unwavering calm. She had turned harassment into an opportunity to expose wrongdoing, and her measured actions had ensured that justice prevailed. The victory was quiet but undeniable, a demonstration of discipline and skill in the face of persistent intimidation. Tanya Jackson woke up early that morning, her mind calm but focused. The courthouse incidents with Officer Daniel Reeves had reached a turning point, but she knew her role was not yet finished. While the court had acknowledged the harassment and misconduct, Tanya wanted to ensure that the situation was fully resolved, both for herself and for others who might face similar intimidation. She reviewed her notes one last time, checking each detail, each piece of evidence, and each witness statement. Preparation was key, and she had never been more ready. Arriving at the courthouse, Tanya noticed the usual morning bustle. Clerks were moving efficiently, attorneys and clients passed through the halls, and Reeves was already present. His posture was tense, his confident demeanor replaced by visible frustration. He had learned through previous interactions that Tanya could not be intimidated, and his attempts at harassment had only highlighted his own unprofessional behavior. Yet, he was still present, hoping perhaps for a final confrontation that might allow him to regain some control. Tanya moved through the halls with calm precision, observing every detail. The positioning of cameras, the interactions between court staff, and the arrangement of the seating were all noted. She did not act out of fear, she acted out of strategy. Her Navy SEAL training had ingrained the importance of understanding the environment, and now it provided a crucial advantage. Every step she took was deliberate, her mind calculating the best course of action. The courtroom session began with routine procedures, but Tanya's presence brought a noticeable change. Court staff and witnesses had observed her previous interactions with Reeves and recognized the dynamic. There was a quiet sense of anticipation. Tanya's calm authority contrasted sharply with Reeves's increasingly obvious tension. His attempts to dominate the situation had been repeatedly undermined by her professionalism and strategic approach. As Tanya's case was called, Reeves attempted to speak over her, but the judge, fully aware of the context, instructed him firmly to allow Tanya to proceed. She rose and approached the bench, carrying herself with quiet confidence. She began presenting her evidence methodically, highlighting each instance of harassment, misrepresentation, and procedural overreach by Reeves. Her voice was steady, precise, and persuasive. Witnesses were called to corroborate Tanya's account. Clerks, fellow community members, and other officials provided statements that confirmed her detailed documentation. Each testimony strengthened her position, creating a clear contrast between her professionalism and Reeves's repeated misconduct. Tanya's calm demeanor and careful preparation made her arguments compelling. Reeves, visibly frustrated, struggled to respond effectively. As Tanya moved through her presentation, she introduced the surveillance footage she had carefully collected. The footage clearly showed Reeves's inappropriate behavior, his attempts to intimidate her, and his exaggerated claims. Tanya narrated each clip calmly, pointing out details with precision. Her explanation left no room for doubt, the evidence was irrefutable. Reeves's overconfidence and attempts at harassment had now become his own undoing. The judge listened carefully, noting the clarity of Tanya's presentation and the thoroughness of her evidence. Reeves's attempts to manipulate perception had failed, and it was now clear to everyone in the courtroom that Tanya had been professional, composed, and entirely correct in her responses to his behavior. The judge emphasized the importance of professionalism and decorum in the courtroom, making it clear that harassment or intimidation would not be tolerated under any circumstances. After Tanya finished presenting, the courtroom was silent for a moment. The weight of the evidence and the calm authority with which she had presented it was undeniable. Reeves sat, frustrated and deflated, realizing that his repeated attempts to control or intimidate her had backfired completely. Tanya's patience, observation, and strategic thinking had turned his misconduct into a public record, demonstrating her strength without aggression. Outside the courtroom, Tanya took a moment to breathe. The sunlight felt warm on her face, a contrast to the tension-filled days she had endured. She reflected on the events, realizing that every step she had taken had been guided by discipline and careful planning. Her Navy SEAL training had not just shaped her physical capabilities, but her mental resilience and strategic thinking. Today, those lessons had ensured justice was served. Reeves faced formal consequences for his actions. Court staff began the process of reviewing his conduct, and it became clear that repeated harassment and unprofessional behavior could not be ignored. Tanya's careful documentation and calm presentation had created an undeniable record. His attempts to assert authority through intimidation had only highlighted his failings. The outcome was not just personal vindication for Tanya, it was a statement that the system could hold those in power accountable when confronted with truth and professionalism. Tanya returned to her community life with a renewed sense of purpose. Her routine remained disciplined: early morning exercise, work at the community center, and personal study and reflection. Yet, the experience had reinforced the importance of vigilance and strategic thinking in everyday life. She shared her story quietly with friends and colleagues, emphasizing the importance of preparation, calmness, and careful observation when facing difficult situations. Her story became an example of how discipline, patience, and professionalism could overcome harassment and intimidation. As the days passed, Tanya noticed subtle changes in how she was perceived. Colleagues, neighbors, and even strangers recognized her calm authority. Reeves's credibility had diminished, and his presence no longer carried the intimidation he had once hoped for. Tanya's composure and strategic response had not only protected her but had also earned the respect of those around her. Her patience and careful planning had created a lasting impression. Tanya reflected on the lessons she had learned. Strength was not always measured by physical ability or aggressive confrontation. True power often lay in patience, preparation, and the ability to remain calm under pressure. She had faced harassment, intimidation, and false accusations, yet she had maintained her integrity and authority throughout. Her approach had been deliberate, methodical, and ultimately successful. She thought about the parallels between her military training and the challenges she faced in civilian life. In both situations, observation, strategy, and composure were essential. Challenges could come from unexpected places, but preparation and careful action could overcome even the most persistent opposition. Tanya felt a sense of quiet satisfaction knowing that she had applied these lessons successfully. Reeves, meanwhile, had begun to face scrutiny from his superiors. Tanya's careful documentation had created an undeniable record of his misconduct. His attempts to intimidate and manipulate had been exposed, and his credibility was now compromised. Tanya's strategic patience had turned what could have been a prolonged and frustrating battle into a clear and decisive resolution. Tanya continued her daily life, confident and composed. She maintained her disciplined routine, balanced work and personal life, and continued her volunteer efforts at the community center. Yet, she remained vigilant, knowing that challenges could arise at any time. Her experiences with Reeves had reinforced the importance of awareness, preparation, and calm authority in all aspects of life. The story concluded with Tanya walking home from the courthouse one afternoon, the city alive around her. She reflected on her journey, the harassment, the intimidation, the careful documentation, and the strategic patience that had allowed her to prevail. She felt a quiet sense of triumph, not because of confrontation, but because of her ability to navigate a difficult situation with intelligence, discipline, and composure. Tanya's experience became a quiet but powerful lesson for those who knew her story. Harassment and intimidation could be met not with fear or aggression, but with calm authority, careful planning, and precise action. She had demonstrated that integrity, patience, and preparation were often stronger than anger or confrontation. In every step, every decision, Tanya had maintained control, ensuring that justice and fairness prevailed. By the end of the story, Tanya had fully restored her peace and authority. Reeves had been exposed, accountability had been established, and Tanya had maintained her professionalism and integrity throughout. The city, the courthouse staff, and even her own community had witnessed her calm strength, and her example became a quiet testament to the power of discipline, strategy, and unwavering composure. As she entered her apartment that evening, Tanya allowed herself a moment to relax. The tension that had shadowed her life for weeks was lifting. She had faced harassment, intimidation, and false claims, yet she had emerged not only victorious but stronger and wiser. Tanya Jackson, Navy SEAL veteran and disciplined strategist, had proven that calm authority and preparation could overcome even the most persistent challenges. She sat by the window, looking out at the city lights, reflecting on her journey. The experience had tested her patience, observation, and strategic thinking, but she had met each challenge with composure and intelligence. Tanya knew that life would continue to present obstacles, but she was confident in her ability to face them with the same discipline and calm authority that had guided her through the ordeal with Reeves. The story ended not with dramatic confrontation, but with quiet triumph. Tanya's resilience, strategic planning, and professional integrity had ensured that justice was served, harassment was exposed, and her authority was respected. She had faced a difficult challenge, turned it into an opportunity, and emerged stronger, wiser, and more confident. Tanya's journey was a testament to the power of discipline, preparation, and unwavering composure in the face of adversity.